Hello and welcome back to Israel with Aline. Today we are going to walk together through the streets of the biblical city of Beit Shean, one of the most colossal and important of the Roman period. We will visit its streets, the theater, its bathhouses, and much more. We will discover what the connection of Jesus and his first disciples with this place, and we will end the day knowing the place where King Saul's body was taken. So if you are ready, let's get started. Here in Beit Shean, 18 cities were built, one on top of the other, and we are going to know two of them today. The first is the city from the time of Jesus, which we can see here with these impressive buildings and columns. And the second historical period that we are going to see today is the time of King Saul and King Solomon. And these archaeological findings are on the hill. Come with me because you will be amazed, jaw-dropped with everything in this city. Because this city is the best preserved Roman city in all of Israel. Let's go. In the archaeological excavations, a theater, a hippodrome, bathhouses, pagan temples, the Cardo, the Decumanus, everything you would expect from a large and important Roman city was found here in the excavations. And we are going to start together at the Great Theater, and you can see that the entrance is already here by our side. Look at the state of preservation of this place. We are talking about constructions that are approximately 2,000 years old. And coming in here is really like taking a trip back in time. Look at this colossal theater. The theater originally had 3 floors. We can see that one of the floors is preserved, but there were 2 more. We can see one of them in the black part, but there was an even higher part of it. And in total, it could hold 7,000 spectators here. Really, 7,000 spectators at that time shows how big and important this city was. But what was really special about it? In Roman times, there were the Decapolis here. Deca means 10 and polis, cities. Here in the region, there were 10 great pagan Roman cities. All this region, as we see on the map, and the most important Decapolis, which can be said to be the capital of the Decapolis, was precisely Beit Shean. It was the leading pagan Roman city of the entire Decapolis region. And that's why these constructions reflect exactly what this city was. Because if we arrived here at that time, on this stage, what kind of shows were performed? Pagan shows mainly for Dionysus, the god of wine, which is the main god worshipped here in the city. Let's continue. And not only is this city from the times of Jesus, we know that Jesus was indeed, at least in part of the Decapolis, part of these 10 Roman cities, as it is written in the Bible itself. And Jesus, going out again from the borders of Tyre and Sidon, went to the Sea of Galilee, along the borders of Decapolis. And they brought to him a deaf man who spoke with difficulty, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd, he put his fingers in his ears, and spitting, he touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately his ears were opened, and the bond of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke perfectly. We clearly hear that Jesus travels within the territory of the Decapolis, and he also performs miracles in Decapolis. We have another example, which is the healing of the demoniac. That is, Jesus crosses the Sea of Galilee to the region of the Decapolis, and he meets the demoniac of Gadara. Gadara is precisely one of the cities of the Decapolis. So we see that Jesus does indeed pass through this territory. He talks to the Gentiles, heals the Gentiles here in the region, and the ministry that Jesus did here in the region for 3 years, what he did here in Decapolis was relatively very little. And the question that comes is why? Why does Jesus come to this place so little? And perhaps the answer is precisely in the local population. We know that the population here is a population with a predominantly Roman culture. And many of these Romans did not like Jews. They did not like the people of Israel, and they saw Jesus as a Jew. And now we are going to go into the excavations and understand what the problem was, why the Romans did not like the Jews. The Romans had a lot of prejudice against the people of Israel. Part of this prejudice they inherited from the Greeks themselves. This is because the Greco-Roman culture and the Jewish culture were opposed in many points. One of them was the relationship with the body itself. According to Judaism, according to the people of Israel, both men and women need to have modesty. And the Greeks and the Romans, exactly the opposite. We know that sports, gyms, the Olympics were done as people came into the world, if you understand me. And here we also have an example. Here we see a large pool. Imagine this place full of water and people swimming here completely naked. Another point of divergence was precisely circumcision. As we know from the Bible, Abraham and his descendants performed circumcision. This is a practice of the Jews to this day. And the Romans and Greeks saw this as an abomination. They did not want anyone to touch the human body. They considered it the perfect body and did not want the Jews to perform circumcision. And that's why at different historical periods, both the Greeks and the Romans not only prohibited circumcision for themselves, but also tried to prohibit it for all the people of Israel through laws. So here we can see precisely the clash of cultures. But more than that, we also know that the Romans called the Jews lazy. The question is why? Because in the Roman Empire, all the provinces they had worked 7 days a week. And the only province that didn't do this was precisely the Judean province, the people of Israel, who once a week, everyone stopped working. From Friday at sunset to Saturday at sunset, everyone refused to work. And that's why the Romans called the Jews lazy. They didn't understand Jewish food. Why Jews didn't eat pork, seafood, and other cultures was a religious issue, a matter of faith. Imagine the cultures was a religious issue, a matter of faith. Imagine this place 2,000 years ago, full of images and statues of worship. The Romans and all their culture was based on polytheism, the worship of many gods. And the worship was done through statues and images. And the complete opposite of this was precisely the people of Israel, and which was and remains monotheistic. That is, they believe in only one God, an omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient God, and a God who is worshipped without the use of statues and images. In fact, we have ancient Roman accounts that suggest They believed the Jews might not even have faith, didn't believe in any God, because they didn't understand how worship could be done without the use of images. This caused a lot of friction, and there was also another problem. Every new territory that the Romans conquered, they demanded total loyalty from the conquered populations. And one way for the populations to prove their loyalty was by worshiping Caesar. For many people at that time, Caesar was a god himself. Caesar was worshipped. Sacrifices were made to Caesar. And all the people in this region did this except for the people of Israel. The people of Israel completely refused to sacrifice for Caesar. And because of this, they were seen as a people who should not be 100% trusted. We see that the religious. And now what we are going to do is enter the religious. And now what we are going to do is enter this building here, because I want to show you more of the Greco-Roman culture and how they lived and especially had fun. Look at this here. Was this part of a heated pool? Yes, look at how it worked. All these columns were the same height and a floor was placed on top of them. So imagine there was a gap under the floor, an open area. On the outside, there was a furnace, and they burned wood and pushed the hot air down the floor. And then the hot air rose up the walls and the floor, and then the hot air rose up the walls and exited through cracks. So they could have a heated pool and could enjoy this spa both in the summer and in the winter. And of course, all completely naked. So for those who want to take a trip back in time, there's no other place in Israel like Beit Shean. We really saw that the Roman culture, the culture of the Decapolis, was not always compatible with the life of the people of Israel. And yes, there were people here with prejudice against Jews. But despite this, we do see that Jesus comes to the Decapolis. Despite less than in the regions of Galilee and Judea, Jesus does come here. And this is very important because we see that Jesus goes to everyone. Even many times he came to cities where Jews like him were not so well received. But despite there being people here with prejudice, yes, there were people here with open hearts to receive the message of Jesus. And we see in the Bible itself that some of the people here in Decapolis start following Jesus. And his fame spread throughout all Syria. And they brought to him all who were sick, afflicted with various diseases and torments, those who were demon-possessed, lunatics and paralytics, and he healed them. And a great multitude from Galilee, Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan followed him. We see that from the beginning of his ministry, Jesus has followers, has disciples coming from the Decapolis. And Beit Shean, specifically in the following centuries, converts to Christianity. Look at what's behind us. This space turns into a small church. This here is a small baptistry. So despite the origins of the city being pagan, then also mainly Roman, we see that in the end the city does convert and will be a city for centuries and centuries of Christian majority. Christian. Despite the grandeur of this city, the city was doomed from the moment of its construction. Why? Because this city was built right on a tectonic fault. You mean we are in one of the most earthquake-prone places in all of Israel? People found out in the worst way, because in the year 700 but they found out in the worst way. Because in the year 749 after Christ, a great earthquake completely devastated the city. All these columns that we see fell, and the city was destroyed in such a terrible way that it was not possible for people to rebuild the city. And that's why the city was abandoned. So Beit Shean that we see here stopped in time. No, in the year 749, the rubble fell, and then all this here was forgotten. And the city, then all this here was forgotten too. And the city was buried for over 1,000 years. One of the archaeological principles that we have talked about many times here on the channel is that the oldest is always underneath and the higher up, the newer. And Beit She is exactly the opposite. The oldest part is precisely the hill. It's the highest part, and this area here where we are walking is the newest. Even so, it's newer. There are 2,000 years of history here. But up there, folks, there are over 5,000 years of history stored. This is because originally the city of Beit, it was small, and all of it was on the hill. And when the Romans expanded it, they also expanded it. What we are going to do is climb the hill and get to know the 5,000 years of history, a history also linked to the King Saul. It's hard to explain to you through the camera how colossal the constructions that are here are. We're seeing gigantic columns that have collapsed. This column, we can clearly see that it stood up there and that it fell here in the year 749, and since then it has not moved, and its capital, folks, is almost my size. Look at this here. We see here the size of the Roman constructions of this place, and not just a matter of size, but also of work. Each of these stones was worked and carved in the smallest details. And it's interesting to see that the capitals and columns, also here behind we see many columns, they are white, because they are made of limestone. Limestone, folks, is easier to be carved and worked. And on the other hand, the floor that we see here below is made of black stones, basaltic stone, which is much harder. This means that it is difficult to carve it, but it is much more resistant. I also think that this contrast of these two colors looks beautiful, but really here we have a small proof of what Beit Shean looked like when Jesus passed through this region. We are going to make this gigantic climb all the way up there, but it will be worth it because up there is 5,000 years of history. There's still a part of the climb left, but I guarantee it will be worth it for us to get up there because of the history. And also because of the view of Beit Shean. And folks, after all this effort that we are making here on the channel, I think we deserve a like today. So if you are enjoying, don't forget to leave a like, and we'll see you up there. Shall we start the story from the beginning? Beit Shean was founded 5,300 years ago by the Canaanites, and precisely what we see here behind us are Canaanite remains of a Canaanite temple, and more specifically, and they dominated here for many centuries. But everything changes here 3,400 years ago when an invading force conquers the city. Who were they? The Egyptians? Yes, the Egyptians conquered most of the land of Israel and left their mark. Look at this here. This is an original personal replica, is kept in the museum, but we can see here Egyptian hieroglyphs in the middle of Israel because the Egyptians conquered and ruled all the land for 350 years, and here was one of the main cities for them. And so this here was an Egyptian governmental palace in the middle of Israel. Isn't it really interesting to see all the cultures passing through here? And also here were found other Egyptian inscriptions that we can now see in these photos. Here in the background, we already see a mountain. This is Mount Gilboa. It is only 7 kilometers away from where we are. The battle of King Saul, who was the king of the battle of King Saul, who was the king of all Israel against the Philistines. And who wins this great battle? Precisely the Philistines. And they kill Saul and his sons, as it is written in this verse. The Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel, fleeing from the presence of the Philistines, fell dead on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines closely followed Saul and his sons and killed Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The battle intensified against Saul. The archers spotted him, and he was severely wounded. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through, so that these uncircumcised may not come and run me through and make a mockery of me." But his armor-bearer refused to do it, for he was very afraid. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. And it came to pass on the next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off Saul's head and stripped him of his weapons. They sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to bring the good news to their idol's temple and to the people. They put Saul's weapons in the temple of Ashtoreth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth Shean. And as we heard, the Philistines didn't just kill Saul and his sons. They wanted to humiliate the king's family and all the people of Israel. And that's why they bring him and his sons, their bodies, and hang them on the walls of Beth Shean. The walls didn't survive, but where were they located? Right here at the end of the city, on the cliff. Also have to be careful here at the end of the city, on the cliff. Also have to be careful here. And on this wall were placed the bodies of Saul, and on this wall were placed the bodies of Saul and his sons. We see the cruelty of the Philistines. Despite the city not being Philistine, they chose this city because it was a pagan city and close to where the battle took place. But we know that the news of what was happening was spreading throughout the land, and people from the people of Israel heard what was happening and came here to rescue him and his sons. Beit Shean has had many ups and downs throughout its history. And we have here 5,000 years of archaeology to prove the history and biblical history of this place. But I also want you to look in the background beyond the archaeological park, because here we can see the city of Beit Shean, which indeed managed to rise again. After the independence of the State of Israel in 1948, the city was rebuilt and is a city that grows and lives to this day. I hope you enjoyed today's video. A big kiss and see you next week.